Hello and welcome to Overwatch Database and our Stage 2 Week 1 recap. I'm here with Connor. If you didn't see our Power Rankings episode, go ahead and go check that out. We also explained in that one why there was kind of like a 2 week gap in content. I actually went on vacation for a week and a half and did not get a chance to make an announcement or a video or anything talking about that. So that's kind of why that happened. So I want to apologize for that. We will have regular content every week now moving forward. So getting into it, kind of going to start off going over some of the scores from last week. So on Friday, there were two games. We saw the Toronto Defiant beat the Paris Eternal, nothing too surprising there. And then the Florida Mayhem beat the London Spitfire. So Friday, so that's kind of the funny thing, is Friday started off so normal. We're like, oh, Paris looks better, maybe London looks a little better, but still kind of the results we were expecting. No upsets. We were kind of like feeling out what the meta is. We were seeing Soldier played. We were seeing Reaper. Lots of Echo, kind of like feeling like Echo is going to be big in the meta, but still didn't have a good idea. And then you go into Saturday, and again, or Saturday night with the APAC games. Again, Hangzhou Spark beating the Charge. Not, super surprising. Shanghai beat the Chengdu Hunters by a score of 3-0. Kind of surprising how much they beat them by, but I don't think it was super surprising that Shanghai won. But then the last game of APAC that night, that was where the craziness started, and it just did not stop for the rest of the weekend. So we saw the New York Excelsior beat the Philadelphia Fusion 3-1. That was immensely surprising. I think more than anything, just how poor Philly looked. Because New York didn't look that amazing. They looked much improved. Don't get me wrong. They looked. I think the tank play was like noticeably what I noticed because Yakpung and Bianca were terrible in the melee. And you just felt like if the tank line could be consistent, they could actually be a pretty competitive team, and they were. But just Philly looked so poor to me. And then Saturday during the day over in NA, the Paris Eternal 3-0ing the Justice. My jaw was on the floor for that one. That was super shocking. Did not see that coming. Did not see Atlanta beating Houston coming. I kind of thought that game would be close, so that wasn't like as much of a surprise, but it was still definitely an upset. And then Boston Uprising 3-0ing Toronto. Again, we kind of felt like, a lot of people felt like, including us, that Boston was going to be better in this meta. But 3-0ing Toronto was a little bit of a surprise. So kind of some wacky, surprising results. And, at that point, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, this meta is going to be kind of fun. We'll see some upsets. And they just didn't, stop coming. Sunday night over in APAC. Hangzhou Spark, 3-0 Shanghai. What the hell was that? I mean, where did that come from? I think the Spark have looked immensely better since putting Shy in. But then also in this meta with playing the Echo and stuff, they just look really, really good. And they made a coaching change, which we'll talk about more later. Then the Guangzhou Charge beat New York. I really was expecting New York to, win that based off that they had just beat Philly. But the Charge beat them 3-1. And the Charge had lost the day before. So that was a little bit of a surprising result. Good win for the Charge, though. Chengdu beat Philly 3-1. Again, Philly just looked terrible. And I think this meta kind of fits Chengdu fairly decent. And then Sunday during the day to round everything out, Atlanta Reign 3-0 London. Ripped my boys. We're 0-6. It feels bad. But good win for Atlanta. I think that they have looked better in the June Joust than they did in the melee. I think it's good to see because there always has been potential. I think Kai and Valentine really are starting to really blossom. And then the Boston Uprising 3-0 the Justice. Again, we expected Boston to be better, but again, another like what the heck, like not expected to happen. And then Houston beat Florida 3-1. That was a pretty good game. I wasn't super surprised by the outcome, and I think that was a really good win for Houston after losing previously in the weekend. So that's kind of a recap of all the games. Kind of what are like the ones that stand out to you, Connor?
Honestly, the two that stick out to me the most were both Sunday games, one in the East region, one in the West. The first one being in the East region with the Fusion losing to the Hunters 1-3, and the other one being in the West region with the Justice losing to the Uprising 0-3. Those are probably the two that stick out to me the most.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of upsets to pick through, but yeah, those two were very shocking. So to kind of start with here, I want to talk about the meta a little bit. So we saw Reinhardt banned for tank, Zenyatta for support, and then Sombra Tracer for DPS. And that clearly had an impact on a lot of the really, really good teams who had elite Tracer players or really good Reinhardt players. And we saw a lot of the impact of that this weekend with a lot of these results. And this meta that we got going on here in the June Joust with those bans has been definitely very interesting. I do miss big 6-man shatters and big pulse bombs, and stuff like that, but I think that overall, it's been a pretty fun meta to watch. And the only thing we know for sure, Echo is essential. Lots of Echo play. I don't think Echo is the most fun hero to watch, or at least I didn't until this weekend. I never was like, oh man, Echo, it'd be so fun to watch this guy play Echo. But man, some of the Echo play was so good, just immensely good. What some of those guys were doing, it was just really impressive, and it was really interesting to see different people's strategies on who to copy. You saw a lot of copying the tanks like D.Va and Winston and stuff, but you also saw a lot of support duplicates. I think is interesting. And some of those may have been accidents, but I don't believe all of them were. So a lot of that was interesting, and it was not bad to watch. I think probably by the end of the stage I'll be overwatching Echo, but that's fine because we're gonna go back to no hero pools, I believe, for the Summer Showdown. So I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, is kind of the point to make there of Echo being so prominent and watching her being played. So in a more some team news, before we get into a lot of the other stuff, London fired their head coach Reprise. I was sad to see him go. I don't ever want someone to lose his job. That's never something you want. But especially as a fan, it was a change that, because I'm a fan of that team, it was a change that needed to happen. They promoted Fisher to head coach. At least, I don't know if he's an interim or the permanent. Probably interim. But they promoted him to head coach for now. And they have looked better. But, all these other teams that were bad in the main melee that have looked good and been picking up wins, London was not one of them. Still lost both their games, and they weren't really particularly that close. So it's pretty tough to watch. But I do think the coaching change was kind of the right move because they did show more coordination and a little bit better teamwork. It was interesting not seeing Shaxx being played, but they actually looked better for it, which is surprising. I don't know why Shaxx has been, so hard to kind of integrate in the roster. I know why he wasn't played right now because Tracer's not in the meta, and that's far and away his best hero, which is fine and all that. I think it was fine not to play him, but yeah, the chemistry did look a little bit better, but it was still not great. And then the other big coaching thing was this Spark fired Pajon, I don't know exactly how you say it, and promoted Andante to, I know he is promoted to an interim head coach. And holy cow, that made such a world of difference. First of all, why was Shy not playing in the first place? Okay, I understand Godsby is good and has been good for a long time, but why was Shy not playing? His Ashe has been so insane. And not only that, the whole team's chemistry and everything has looked immensely better under Andante. And I'm just so excited to watch this team because I think this is a team that, unlike most of the perceived bad teams in the main melee that have been doing better in the June Joust because of the hero bans, I think this team can carry it forward through the other stages too. And I'm really excited to see that. I think that obviously there was a lot of really poor coaching decisions going on under the previous coach. First of all, not integrating some of these other players. I would have liked to see Ligue, be playing this, or League, however you say it, been playing this year, and some of these other guys, and they just didn't do it. And you're probably not going to see him now at this point because it's you're not going to integrate him into the roster in the middle of the season. But I think playing Shy has been good, and this team has a lot of potential moving forward. So another piece of team roster additions and changes and stuff I wanted to bring up was Houston signed Dreamer, who we last saw, I believe, last year for the Valiant, he plays main tank, and we saw him play this weekend. They subbed him in over Jengu, and he played, I think, mostly Orisa and Ball, from what I recall. I don't remember if he might have played something else, but I think that was the majority what he played was Orisa and Ball. I think especially they subbed him in over Jengu to play Orisa, because I don't think Jengu does. And so, I know, obviously, Connor, you watched the Houston games, and you're a Houston fan, so kind of what were your thoughts on him in his first week with the team?
Honestly, I think he subbed in nice and played really well. Like we said in our previous videos, the people coming from Contenders, because he actually went from Valiant back to Contenders, he went to Dark Mode, and then back.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he played for the Valiant for 4 seasons, and then back to Contenders for Dark Mode. And then came he played there. He played for them in March of this year, and then came back to the league. So I don't know what was going on there. Maybe he, when he wasn't signed to a team, he went back to Contenders just to have some level of gameplay still there and stay up to date, I guess. But yeah, I think he played really well.
Worked out well for him.
Yeah, like these people coming in from Contenders, they've all been really good. So I mean, given that he is actually a main tank player, though his top pick for tank is Ryan, and Ryan's banned, so he's been playing a lot of ball. So I feel like during the next stage, when Ryan's back in, if they have him play, they're going to have him play Ryan. So we'll get to see that, even though we haven't been able to see it yet. So I'm assuming it's good, because
I don't think we will.
Yeah.
I think
so?
they've. No, I think it was pretty obvious they strictly brought him in for this meta to play ball and Orisa. And I think the reason they did it is because Jengu can play ball. We actually saw his ball in the May Melee, and it was decent. But I think they wanted to bring in Dreamer because it gave them more flexibility so they could still play ball, but also have the ability to play Orisa, which they did a lot. So I think as soon as the June Joust is over and we get into the Summer Showdown and Reinhardt's back, I think we'll strictly see mostly Jengu. I think we still will see Dreamer. Maybe map dependent, certain maps where I
can see that happening.
Ball is better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that mostly we'll go back to Jengu. I think this is first. Specifically the hero pool stages, which will be this stage and the last stage before playoffs, I think is when Dreamer will be played. But yeah, I think that I kind of agree with you. I think he's subbed in really well on the team. He hasn't looked elite or anything. So
speaking of hero pools, just a side comment. I'm so glad they got rid of that in actual comp instead of just league and comp. Oh my gosh, that was horrible. When you'd be like, oh, I can't play Ashe today. Well. Oh, I can't play Widow either. Both snipers are banned. Oh, we get no pockets on those now. I'm so glad they got rid of that. I like that they still kept it for Overwatch League, and it's so much better this year. Last year it was it changed every week when they would do it. So every week different people would be banned, and it was too much because teams couldn't adjust to it every week like that. So just doing hero bans for a whole stage, I think has been great. And I think also breaking it up and only doing it every other stage is a really nice change too, because you have a meta that a lot of people were mad they were doing hero pools for this stage, but let's be honest, the meta from the May Melee was starting to settle, and it would be boring if we were watching the same thing. So it's nice we're getting all these crazy results this stage, and then we're going to jump into the Summer Showdown, go back to kind of what it was without the hero bans, and then the last stage before playoffs we'll have hero pools, so that'll shake things up because it'll probably be different heroes banned, and then we'll go into the playoffs and there is no hero pools in playoffs. So. But yeah, I think Dreamer, going back to that, has been really good. He hasn't been elite or anything, but he's been a really nice sub-in for them and looked pretty good. And actually, the last piece of roster news we did not talk about because it's pretty old news, but I was on vacation, and so we just didn't get to do anything about it, was Pine signed by the Dallas Fuel. So they have a hit scan now. You heard about that, didn't you, Connor? I actually didn't hear about that. I only heard about Dreamer. I actually did not know anyone else was signed.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago, but I was on vacation a week, so it was when we weren't able to do any videos. But yeah, so the Dallas Fuel signed Pine, who is a hit scan. He has not played in 2 years. So that's kind of the caveat to it. We don't know what he's going to look like. I think he was doing coaching previously, so he probably still played and stayed in game shape, I imagine. But that's going to be really interesting because he was amazing in the first season for the New York Excelsior. His Widow was insane. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays and also kind of how Dallas integrates him. So Dallas did say he will play this stage, but not till the last week or two because they want to take some time to put him into the roster. So we won't see him yet, probably a couple more weeks. But my question for Dallas is, one, how much do you play him? And two, are you going to just play him specifically map dependent if it's more of a sniper map? I think there's a lot of questions to be answered there and tell me if you think differently, Connor, but I think there's a lot of room to where the Dallas Fuel could put him in, a guy who hasn't played for 2 years, and this really messes with what the team has going for them. If they don't do this properly, it could kind of kill this, the run the team is on.
I mean, has he not played for 2 years within the league, within contenders, or just in general? Has he been playing Overwatch, though?
So he's been playing ranked, but he hasn't played in a pro setting in 2 years. I
mean, I feel like the top of GM, it's almost league level, so, I mean, you're going to get about the same level of difficulty, but without being on a team, and, having a specific set of players on a roster to learn how they work. I mean, I'm assuming that he might group up with the same amount of people, so he has some team setting where everyone has an assigned few characters or something like that. But if that's not the case and he's just solo queuing or something, that may I guess, dampen his abilities to.
Well, I know
Like,
that in part of the last 2 years he was coaching. He was still playing ranked, but he was coaching.
okay, if he was coaching, then I don't think there would be much of a problem there because he's still staying up to date and improving, I guess, his skills while improving other
Yeah.
people's skills. So I don't think there would be a problem there.
So I guess what I'm kind of getting at is I don't think he's washed. Like I think his play will be okay, but Sparkle and Doa have been so good with because what has helped Dallas succeed is not playing the meta, right? Playing their own thing, playing to their strength. So if they say in stage 3 in the Summer Showdown, we have no hero pools, or we won't have hero pools. So say they decide, oh, we're gonna start playing the meta instead of just doing our own game, what's worked for us. We're going to start playing the meta. We're going to play Hitscan and we're going to play Pine. And say Pine is okay, but he's just league average. Wouldn't I think the team would look worse than just playing what's been working for them. And I'm worried they're going to fall into this trap of, oh, we can play the meta now, so we're just going to play Pine and play the meta instead of playing to our strengths like we were doing. And I think they'll still look good, but I think they'll look worse. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, I have to agree
So
with
that's
that.
kind of I think they got to be very careful about how they integrate him and when to play him. I think he should be a strictly map dependent player. I think you just play him on maps that are very sniper friendly, personally. So I just want them to be careful because the Dallas Fuel story has been great. I've been really happy for this team, and so I just want them to be careful with how they do that. So something we wanted to do this week before we do the pick'ems, we're still going to do our 5 pick'ems at the end. I kind of wanted to look at the standings because we're over a full stage in. We're about to be halfway through stage 2. And I think you can kind of get a feel for things a little bit. Well, I say that, and we had all these crazy results this week. But so looking at the North American standings, points-wise, Houston, Florida, and Dallas are all tied technically kind of for first at 5 points. Fourth is Washington with 4. I think that's going to change. I think they're going to fall way down. And then fifth and sixth, well, actually, 5th through 8th is all a tie. Toronto, the Shock, the Reign, and the Uprising. That's really interesting because we don't know, how the Shock are going to look in this meta. Boston looks really good. Like, there's a world where I think the Shock and the Gladiators I think the Shock could move out of the top 6 because the top 6 is what makes the playoffs at the end. I think this stage there's a world where the Shock move out of the top 6 and the Gladiators stay down there, and we see like Boston, Atlanta, up in the standings pretty high, and that might change in stage 3. But it is kind of interesting to look at because you're like, the Shock are kind of just hanging in there in the top 6. The Gladiators aren't even in it. Boston's on the rise. I mean, really, Paris has been on the rise. I think the only 2 teams you really count out as like no chance to get top 6 is probably Vancouver and London at this point. And really, we haven't actually seen Vancouver play in this meta. Maybe they're good. So just kind of wanted to go over the standings because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. I expect Toronto to drop from where they are, but I think the top 3 will stay pretty similar. I think Houston, Florida, Dallas will be the top 3 kind of throughout the year. Maybe if the Shock figure everything out, what's been going on with them, they kind of join that group, and we kind of have. I think those could be like the 4 best teams. And then looking over at the APAC side of things, first place the Shanghai Dragons with 6 points all by themselves. I think they'll stay in first pretty much this whole stage. And then in second and third tied Philadelphia and Chengdu. And then actually tied for fourth is, and in the top 4 in this stage, or every stage for APAC makes the knockouts. Seoul and Hangzhou are tied. I think we're going to see Hangzhou in the knockouts for APAC, which we didn't last stage. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about the standings because I think New York even has a chance. So I think we're going to see a lot of different than we saw previously. Again, like I said in APAC, I think we're going to see the Spark in the top 4 knockouts. And then over in the NA side of things, I think we're going to see Boston, who we didn't see in stage 1 because they were really poor. We're going to probably see Atlanta, who we didn't see. We should see the Gladiators this time. I do really anticipate that they will kind of turn into that top 5-ish team we thought they would be coming into the year. So kind of like just looking at the standings, Connor, what's kind of like the team, just either one that's too like higher than you would think or lower that kind of stands out the most in each of the NA and APAC sides?
Okay, so for each region, for East, I would have to say a team that's surprising me is Spark. For West region, I would have to say Outlaws. Like, I have no clue what's been going on with them. Like I said before, been, fans since like the first, second season-ish, they weren't great, okay, but they were good. and I enjoyed watching their games. And I don't know what's happening right now, but they're just destroying almost every single team they go against, unless it's like one of the top teams, like Shock, of course. But they put up a great fight against the Shock last stage, and that was really surprising. And when they go against the Fuel, of course, Fuel lost to DPS, so I mean there was that on that. But I'm really surprised Houston is even where they are right now. And with Spark, that just came out of nowhere. I mean, like, I think when we were doing our preseason things, we thought Spark would be lower, correct?
We thought they would be low. We thought they had a lot of potential, but because of we thought the coaching would be bad, so they would be lower, which the coaching was bad, and they were lower, and then they fired their coach, and they've looked really good now. So, pretty much what we said, I think. So yeah, I think Houston is a good one to point out, because even with how Stage 1 started, still them being in first. And not only are they in first, technically they're tied points-wise, but they also have such a better map differential than everybody else. And I think map differential is a very important stat to look at, because you can be you can be 10-0, but win every match by one map, and you can be 10-0 with a +10 map differential. And then you can have like a 6-4 team that blows teams out, and their only losses are close games, and they're probably technically maybe better than the 10-0 team. So I think map differential is really important to look at. And Houston is +7. I believe that's the highest in the league. It is. It's tied with Seoul. Actually, that surprises me. Seoul also has a +7 map differential. That's actually really interesting. That makes me actually think higher of Seoul than I do. So they have the highest in the league. I think that is very, very surprising. And the Shock for being 3-1. I mean, theirs is +5, which is pretty good as well. So for our final segment here, we're going to do our predictions for next week's games, as we've been doing previously. So the first match next week we're going to predict here is New York versus the Seoul Dynasty. And I'll start with you, Connor. Who are you picking to win this game?
For that one, I put Seoul 3-2 on New York. I mean, I think it's going to be a really close game. It could go either way, but I think Seoul's going to win that.
Yeah, I'm going to actually take Seoul as well. I think New York has potential in this stage. Obviously, they picked up a win and they've looked better. But even though I have a lot of consistency issues with Seoul, I still expect, the roster is much better, way more experienced. And I don't think Seoul will be terrible in this meta. I think they'll be roughly the same, and I think that should be good enough to beat New York. So yeah, that is my reasoning for that. The second match, this one is tougher than me. This one is tougher for me. The Atlanta Reign versus the LA Gladiators. So it's tough because you have Atlanta, who I was never high on in the first place, but they've looked better in this stage, versus the Gladiators, who we haven't even seen them play in this meta yet. But they went 2-2 in the May Melee, and after being like a top 5 team, everybody had them as a top 5 team going in or higher. And they went 2-2 and didn't even qualify for knockouts. But you kind of feel like they could still be that really elite team we think. So really tough one for me. Personally, I did end up going with the Gladiators because I just can't shake this feeling that the roster is so good. They've had all this time. I mean, they haven't played in forever because they didn't qualify for the knockouts, and then they didn't play in this first week. So they have had a lot of time off to fix the mistakes, figure out, the roster they want to run up. First of all, stop subbing out Bird Ring. They stopped doing that the last week they played in Stage 1, and they looked so much better. So just play Bird Ring the whole time. And they just had so much time to work stuff out. I really think the Gladiators are going to come out and start kind of fulfilling what we thought of them in the preseason.
Okay, so I'm not going to agree with you on Gladiators for that one. I think Reign's going to win that one. I mean, Gladiators are a good team, but with how Reign's been doing, I don't think it's going to be a complete stomp, like 3-0, but more close to 3-1, maybe 3-2. Of course, the lower score being the Gladiators on that one.
Well, and I think that's fair. I totally could get why someone would pick Atlanta, because one, Atlanta looks good in this meta. We haven't seen the Gladiators play. I think your pick is smarter. I think mine's just based off what I think that the Gladiators can be. So the next match we have is the Toronto Defiant versus the Houston Outlaws. That was a pretty no-brainer one for me. I picked Houston. I just think that I think they're better coached than Toronto. I think Harsha and Junkbuck have been amazing for them as coaches, and Jake too. coaching and playing. And I think that they're one of the they're one of the only like top elite teams that haven't looked like doo-doo in this stage. So they did lose that game, but they still look good, right? And they still beat Florida, I think. So I think Houston was kind of a no-brainer. I assume I pretty much know where you're going to go, but who are you going to take for this one?
You knew I was going to pick Outlaws for that one, honestly. But the question is, are they going to 3-0? Are they going to 3-0 Defiant?
I think they could. Every good team, like I was saying earlier in the power rankings and earlier in this recap, Toronto's a bad 4-2 team. They beat the teams they should, and then every time they play, I don't think they've played a top team and not got 3-0'd. They've got 3-0'd every time, and I think Houston's a top team. So to answer that, yes, I think they will get 3-0'd.
Okay, well, that was a quick answer.
Yeah,
with
you just
good reasoning too.
Every top team they've played, they've lost 3-0. I don't really see why that would change in this game, because Toronto hasn't looked particularly amazing in this meta, So Houston it is for both of us there. So match number 4. This one, this was so hard. So Dallas Fuel versus the San Francisco Shock. This is the last game of the week on Sunday next week. I'm going to let you start on that one.
Oh boy, this one. I think this is going to be a really close game. It could go either way. I think Shock's going to win this against Fuel, but with these hero bans in place, we don't know how that's going to go. Fuel might win against the Shock, so the Shock win against Fuel. That's the problem. It could go either way, and this one's such a hard thing to pick.
It is. Well, because one, it's the Shock, so you're automatically inclined to pick the Shock, but two, we don't know how Shock have played. So my reasoning was, for picking Dallas, was we haven't seen how Shock are going to play in this meta. Some of the substitutions they were doing in the main melee were really weird, with Violet on DPS and not playing Clister, and we don't know if those issues have been sorted out. And also on the Dallas side of things, another, from their perspective, why I picked them was they don't have to play the meta to be good. I think they should still be just as good. The only way I see this going poorly for Dallas is if they play Pine early or something, because they said they were going to wait till a couple weeks into the stage to play him. So if they played him early, maybe I could see that going poorly. So yeah. So with all that said, are you going to go with the Shock?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Shock for that one. Like I said, it could go either way, but I think Shock's going to win that most likely 3-2.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, it's the Shock. I mean, I think picking them in any game is obviously super reasonable. And then the final match to predict for next week that we have is the New York Excelsior versus the Los Angeles Valiants.
I mean, that should be a given one. New York 3-0 Valiant. I mean, you know that's going to happen. Okay, Valiant's the worst team. New York's going to 3-0 them.
So, hot take, I'm going to pick the Valiant. I know that's weird, but we've seen all these poor teams from the main melee do so much better in this meta. New York's not that good. New York has looked slightly better in the June Joust, but they're still not a good team. I mean, what's their record? 2-4? So I just think the fact that New York hasn't looked that good, and the Valiant could be just as bad as this meta as they were, in the main melee, and that could totally be the case. But I just like to think that, like most of the other kind of bad teams from stage 1, that they could improve. So I'm actually going to pick the Valiant. So that's our pick'ems for this week. Just to recap, we both picked Seoul to beat New York. I took the Gladiators against Atlanta. Connor took Atlanta. We both took Houston to beat Toronto. Dallas versus the Shock. Connor picked Shock. I picked Dallas. And I picked the Valiant to beat New York, whereas he picked New York to beat the Valiant, which is probably the smarter pick. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of tough ones in there. Especially Dallas Shock, I think, and Atlanta Gladiators really the two hardest for me. So looking back at the previous 2 recaps we did, where we did predictions, because we said previously we're going to track of these, and I don't know, we're probably going to do something regarding which one of us wins, or maybe the loser has to do something. Not sure yet on that, but so far in the previous 2 weeks, we did 5 games each, so after the first 10 matches, I have a record of 8-2, and Connor is 7-3. So it's pretty tight. Only 1 game behind. And honestly, we'll probably be tied because the Valiant probably won't beat New York. But I have faith they're going to do it. So that is our predictions. And I believe that is all we have for our recap for week 1 of stage 2. Let us know in the comments what you thought. if you think our predictions are terrible, and what you thought about the rest of the episode, some of the talking points we talked about. Make sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications. And just a heads up, we will actually have an extra content video coming out later this week. We don't have a set day yet. We will announce it on our Twitter, though, so you can follow us on there. It will probably be Friday, Saturday, somewhere in that area. Post a video, and we're going to talk about the developer stream where they talked about all the Overwatch 2 stuff, the 5v5 and all of that. So we're going to go over all the stuff they announced in that and kind of give our perspective on it and a lot of stuff the community is talking about. So that'll be at the end of this week. So keep an eye out for that. And we will see you next week for the next Power Rankings and recap, and enjoy the games this weekend.